Welcome to episode 8 of the Prepare to Prosper podcast, where we prepare today, prosper tomorrow. Last week we discussed water. This week we're discussing food. Next week's going to be shelter. And I didn't plan it this way, but I'm glad food and shelter are right next to each other. Because there's that old cliche of we got to put food on the table and a roof over our heads. And today we're going to talk about putting food over our table. There's a reason that that's a cliche. Those are two of the most difficult in some ways to secure needs. They're two of the, let me say that again. They're two of the most hard to secure needs because we usually just keep buying them over and over again. Like we pay our mortgage every month and we buy food every week. Some people even less. Some people daily. Don't buy food daily. That's a bad plan. So we're going to go talk about this is going to be an overview. We're not going to go into every detail on food storage. And later I'll do videos and podcasts. And I already got some videos on the YouTube channel about dehydrating and canning. Later we're going to go into greater details on food storage stuff. Maybe do an episode just about each dehydrating and do an episode about canning, stuff like that. But today we're just going to go do an overview on food storage. So there's three basic types of food storage. There's the deep pantry of the stuff you use every day. There's lightweight traveling stuff for your bug out bag. And there's long-term storage stuff. And for all those things, you should store what you actually eat and also eat things that you store. So you're constantly rotating them. I got that from Jack Spirko, the Survival Podcast. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to buy a pallet of Spam because, Spam lasts forever. It lasts like 5 years. So you buy a pallet of Spam. 6 years from now, you notice, hey, all this Spam's expired. Now you got to throw away a pallet of Spam. That's stupid. You need to buy food now, or buy food that you're going to eat, and buy a little bit extra of it all the time. So there's two ways to get into your pantry. This is the stuff. I have a deep pantry. This is the stuff you're using all the time to do your normal cooking with. And the easiest way for most people, and it works for a lot of people, is to have a food journal. Just take a cheap notebook, $1.99 or whatever notebook, throw it on the kitchen counter. Every time you cook or eat something, write it down. And then go through, you look at your list after a couple of weeks, and mark everything, put like a check mark or a star next to it. If it's something that you can store, whether that be frozen or canned or something like that. And that's the stuff you want to concentrate on storing first. I've tried that. So I tried that with my late wife and when we lived with her mom, and especially her mom, but they didn't want to fill out the food journal. It didn't work. And it doesn't really fit me and Sarah and the kids' lifestyle now to write the food journal. But it works for a lot of people. I encourage everybody to try it. Not only tells you what kind of food you're eating and what you're storing, but it also tells you what you're eating. So you might look at that and be like, man, I'm eating a lot of junk food. That's not the purpose of the list, but it may be a side effect of it. So your food journal. What we do is we just have a list of foods that we actually like to eat, and we store the ingredients for those. So we have in our pantry area, we have two bookshelves, and what we did is we started out putting each ingredient, like soy sauce, mayonnaise, ketchup, each of those kind of things you buy from the store, or teriyaki sauce that we can, or red sauce that we can. We'll get into canning in a little bit later here. We give each one of those their own slot on the shelves. And once we had all that taco sauce, all that stuff in their own slots, then we started going to the grocery store we go every other week. We go on our every other week trip, and we'd make sure we had two of every one of those things on the shelves. Then 2 weeks later, we pick like one or two shelves, and like not in the 1 or 2 shelving units, just 1 or 2 individual shelves, and we make those 3 of any of the things we need. And then the next time we go 4, and then as we filled that up, we're now starting to store the stuff underneath our bed and on a shelf in our bedroom. So when we go to the store, when we write down our grocery list, first thing we grocery shop from is underneath our bed and the shelf in our bedroom. And we take that stuff and move it into the kitchen, into the pantry area where we can use it. And then we cross it off the list and don't shop for it. Or if it's something that we need to replenish in those supplies, we'll replenish it from there. We're just getting to the point where we're storing stuff in our bedroom. We got a ton of broth and some chicken stored up and a few other things stored under the bed. So the food list is what works for us. And then another thing we do besides having those ingredients things is we take meals that we like every Thursday. Let's say yesterday we made chicken teriyaki. So Sarah made extra teriyaki sauce, and we canned it, and it can go in the pantry. Also, we are going to get to the point where we're canning extra, like we'll do chicken teriyaki and actually can it with the chicken in it, or take red sauce and put the hamburger in it and the other stuff and make spaghetti sauce and can it. And that way, if it's a busy day, like Mondays are pretty busy for us usually, or we're doing some other thing and it's busy and we don't want to go out to eat, we can just open these jars, cook it. We might need to add some noodles or some rice or something like that to make it into a meal. But we don't have to cook, and that rotates through what we've canned. And also, it tells us what we're actually eating. And saves time, we don't have to, and money because we don't have to go out to eat. And remember, it's Prepare to Prosper podcast. Saving money is part of the plan here. But also in an emergency, we can take, if it's a long-term emergency, something where we need to dip into our deeper food storages, we have this food that we already like, that we're already eating constantly, already canned up as leftovers, ready to go. We just have to open the jar, pour it in there, and then we can take our long-term storage, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, of rice, beans, noodles, stuff like that, and make like cornbread, or take some elbow macaroni, or some spaghetti noodles, stuff like that, and take the canned stuff and stretch it and make it last even longer. I should do a short. I'll do a short video on the YouTube channel on the different places we got food stored. I'll do that in the near future. All right, so we covered pretty much, got the food list, food journal food list, and our deep pantry. All right, now let's go on to the kind of food we have for our bug out bags. A lot of people like MREs. MREs are great. They're just really bulky. You really need to strip them down, make them smaller, get rid of a lot of the packaging in them. I like O'Meals, which is like a civilian MRE, because the price of MREs is outrageous and has gone way up recently. So I like O'Meals. There's a few other brands like that. But what these are is they're meals that you just take the entree packet, throw it in a bag with a chemical heater and pour water in it, and it gets hot. You don't need fire or anything like that. You don't have to boil water. And you can eat them cold. You can. I don't like doing it, but you can eat them cold. And this way you don't need fire. So if you're in a hurry, you're on the move, or even if you're in the hospital where you can't boil, like your wife's in the hospital, you're sitting in the waiting room, you're hungry, you can go grab this food. You don't need to boil water, because that's going to be difficult to do in a hospital. And they'll probably frown upon you even setting up your little stove in the parking lot, let alone building a fire. Next thing people like in their bug out bags is like Mountain House meals. The problem with that is they're freeze dried. You really should boil water to make them and dump it in the packet to make it work. You can cold soak, But I've never tried it, but it sounds gross. And a lot of people say that, like, you can eat it, but it takes away from almost all the flavor in it. And they don't have a lot of flavor to begin with. And my other problem with Mountain House, they're expensive. They're just as expensive as the old meals, even though you have to boil water. And then you also have to carry all that water, too, or find water to use to boil to cook with. But you shouldn't be doing a lot of cooking or planning to cook. Like, you shouldn't have, like, rice, beans, stuff like that. Anything that requires you to actually stop and cook isn't really the purpose of a bug out bag. It's food you can eat real quick, food you can eat on the go, stuff like that. Also in here is, in that kind of category, is like snack food, high energy snack food that you can eat out of your bug out bag, or if you put together a kit to have in case somebody goes to the hospital or something like that, with a couple change of clothes and stuff like that, you can put snack type food in there. So I don't recommend MREs because they're expensive and heavy. I don't recommend Mountain House because they're expensive and you gotta carry extra water, which makes them heavy, and you gotta stop and cook, at least boil the water. And also, there's all kinds of videos on YouTube you can look up, and a lot of articles on the internet that explain how to make homemade MREs. Those are great too. Don't have a problem with homemade MREs, especially if you can buy chemical heaters, which you can buy separate, and figure out how to use those chemical heaters so you don't have to heat anything up, boil water, none of that stuff. All right, so we're going to go on to long-term deep storage. That's primarily putting food in buckets. Your three main categories for food in buckets are corn, beans, rice, and wheat. Those store for a long time. Basically, you take a food grade bucket. I buy mine from that had soy sauce in it from an Asian store. I pay $3 a bucket with a lid, sometimes even less than that. And you take a Mylar bag, put it in there, dump the beans in it, dump the rice, corn, whatever your wheat berries, whatever you're doing. As you're pouring that in there, you add a little bit of diatomaceous earth, which means if it's ground up seashells, and it's just a powder. It feels a lot like baby powder. But what it means is if any of the little eggs, because there's always bug eggs inside of dried foods, when those bug eggs hatch and start crawling around, or when they're in the little larval form, as soon as they hatch and they're in their little microscopic larva that you can't see, that diatomaceous earth will stick to them and dry them out, and it's actually really sharp to the bugs. It's not sharp to us because we're so much bigger, but on those little bugs it's sharp, so it'll puncture their skin, and then it's dry and dries them out and kills them. Also, throw an O2 absorber in there. It'll suck all the oxygen out, so also it'll kill the bugs. So you have a redundant system of killing the bugs, eggs that are already in there, and also the bucket and the Mylar will keep bugs from getting into it. Now you still want to try to store those in a cool, climate-controlled, dry space. You can store them outside. It's just better if you can. Don't waste a lot of space in your house with them. We keep ours in our crawl space. In basements, there's a good idea. I wouldn't recommend an attic because it gets so hot in most attics. I'd rather store it outside than in an attic. But to each their own. And right now we've been using 5-gallon buckets, or 5-gallon bags. Once we use up all the 5-gallon bags we already have, we're going to switch to 1-gallon bags. 1-gallon Mylar bags in there. The buckets won't hold quite as much, but if we do have to get into it, it'll be a lot easier to manage. And, you put I forgot a step. You put your dry goods in there, you put the diatomaceous earth, throw an oxygen absorber in there, you take a straightening iron, seal the top of the Mylar, shove it in there, pound the lid shut in the Mylar bag, or on the bucket. And I recommend not using your wife or girlfriend's straightening iron to seal it. Not because it'll damage the straightening iron, but she might get upset and damage you. I haven't actually done that, but it's still good advice. Um, we don't store wheat berries though, but we might eventually. Right now, we're storing just the noodles themselves, spaghetti noodles, elbow macaroni, shells, um, and we have stored some flour too, so we can make bread and make noodles and stuff like that. We need to invest in a grinder and then buy the wheat berries. And what we do for everything except for corn is when we go to the grocery store to do our regular shopping, we buy just an extra 2 pound bag of, well, let's say we're trying to fill a bucket with rice. We'll buy an extra like 5 pound bag of rice or a 2 pound bag of rice. And we'll take it home, and in the closet, we take it home, and in one of our closets, we have a bucket with the Mylar bag already in it. We'll take that bag of rice, and you should do this with all the rice you store in your pantry too. Any dry good you store in your pantry: rice, beans, flour, noodles, anything like that, sugar. When we bring any of that stuff home, it goes in the freezer for 24 to 48 hours first to, again, kill all those bug eggs. So let's back to filling the bucket. We come home with our 2 pound bag of flour, throw it into the freezer, let it freeze for 24 to 48 hours. Then we take it and dump it into that Mylar bag inside that bucket. Once it's full, it takes like a month, 2 months, whatever it takes. You seal it up, pack it up. This way you're not spending so much money on everything all at once. And you can spread that out over the course of a couple months for each bucket. And it really makes it cheap and easy to do, and just part of your lifestyle, part of your normal grocery routine is slowly filling these buckets up. And that way you can store food without such a huge upfront cost. Because your goal is to store 3,500 calories per person per day. And then from that you can calculate how many days you want to store it. And so a lot of preppers go with, they want to store food for 3 months, 6 months, or a year. Well, that's 350 or 3,500 calories per person per day, multiplied by how many days you want to store the food for. So like 90, 180, 365, whatever number that ends up being for you. But this way you don't have to upfront all the cost to fill like 10 buckets at once. If you can get your prepper group to get together, you can buy like a pallet of rice or a pallet of beans and do it all at once and split it among everybody. That'd be even better. And then you get the save more money by buying a pallet of it at a time. Unfortunately, I haven't got my prepper group willing to do that yet. We're working on it with them. But also, the reason corn, beans, rice, and wheat, those are easy to store long term. And basically, to get that 3,500 calories for a year, it's 250 pounds of each one of those. So 250 pounds of corn for each person, 250 pounds of beans for each person, 250 pounds of wheat for each person, and 250 pounds of, I think, rice is the one I missed, for every person will get you a year. Adjust accordingly for your time frame. And I got that from Bear Independent, and I double checked the math, and it turned out he's right. His YouTube channel is really great. Recommend it for everybody. Excuse me. So then that covers the long-term storage there. And also really great, something we want to do for long-term storage eventually is get a freeze dryer. That way we can take advantage of good sales and stuff coming out of the garden and stuff like that. And we can freeze dry our own food. But that's a huge upfront cost. We will be selling freeze-dried food when we get it to offset the cost of buying one. But they're like $3,000 to get one. So we're nowhere near buying one yet. So your homework for this week is to either start your food journal or start making your food list. And figuring out what foods you're going to store. You need to store what foods you eat in order to know which foods you store. So I'll come back next week. We're going to talk about shelter. Because remember, put food on the table, roof over the head. And then after that, we'll be going on to the next survival need. Next one of your basic needs. In episode 9 is shelter. 10 will be whatever the next one is. I don't have the complete list in front of me. But that's enough rambling for today. Remember, do your homework this week. Come back here next week. And also remember, we prepare today, prosper tomorrow.